Hello everyone, and happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Super happy to have this meetup again and meet with you all here on YouTube. Before we get started, I would like to tell you a little bit more about who we are. Let's start with the word T12t. The English word accessibility has 11 letters between A and Y, and that's why it's commonly shortened as A11Y, or Ali, as some people say. The Swedish word for accessibility is tillgänglighet, and because there are 12 letters between T and T, it's shortened as T12t. We have a code of conduct that you can find at t12t.se/code-of-conduct. If you encounter or observe any behavior that is not in line with the code of conduct, please get in touch with us. You can find our contact details on our website t12t.se. Our schedule today, we have many speakers. We have Åsa, who is speaking about inclusive design at work. Ilias has a talk titled From Nobody Cares to Natively Curious. Hampus is speaking about how Sticky Ali wins. Our second Åsa Holmberg, is going to tell us about their journey from Ali awareness to knowledge and ability. Then we have Martin, who is going to tell us how you can use a quiz to teach accessibility. And finally, Marika have a talk titled I Have to Tell You, which is about how digital accessibility can increase diversity. What about breaks? We have 10 minutes between every talk, and that is for you to chat with the speakers or to grab something to drink maybe. And don't worry if you don't get back in time. We will record this and it will be available on YouTube afterwards. So the only thing you miss is hanging out in the chat. What about next meetup? We have not really decided our next meetup yet, but if you would like to speak, get in touch with us. We love to have new speakers. And we would also like to see you online. We are in a lot of places, meetup.com, of course, probably where you signed up for this. I'm running the T12t Twitter account. We also have a Slack that is growing every week. Last time I looked, there are over 300 people there. On LinkedIn, you can get in touch with Eric, who is running our account there. And we are here on YouTube, as you all know. And if you are on Facebook, you can find this group called Tillgänglighetstruppen. And all the links to these places are available on t12t.se, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. So now it's time to start with our first speaker.
Hi there, welcome, and thank you so much T12t for having me here tonight. My name is Åsa Gustafsson, my company is Futurista, Diversity and Inclusion, and tonight we will talk about inclusive language for people with disability, just in order to make the workplace more accessible. My experience is that talking about accessibility and disability, a lot of people I meet tend to worry about what words to use. So we will start with just the basic. You know the difference between disabled and disability? A lot of you probably do, but here's a short one. Disability. It's a person with a disability. A person has a disability, but it's their surrounding that is disabled. A person becomes disabled if the surrounding is disabled. Otherwise, the disability is not disabled. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then we have the word handicap. Let's just leave that one at the go, of course. And second, when we think about disability and accessibility, a lot of us tend to think about people in using wheelchairs, and that's great, but let's just not stop there, because then it would be like this short movie. Oh, there comes a hand to push the button with a wheelchair on. Yeah, and we see a door slowly opening and shows stairs. Cred for trying. But the same as in this example, if we just focus on using wheelchair and accessibility for that, we will miss the whole big group of people who have invisible disabilities. And to make sense of this inclusive language, what is it, why should we talk about it, I'm going to show you a pyramid here. And in the bottom, you will have ableism and structure. We all had those. Many of us have had this colleague who is really amazing, creative, energetic, like really fast thinking. I had the honor once to work with a colleague named, we will name her Anna tonight. She was the coolest one to work with. She could come into the room where I was working with accessibility project, a big accessibility project, and I had my flow scheme on the wall, and she could just come into like, oh, look there, they're under. You should do that one there and there. Have you thought about the risk there? Like, just by looking at it, she was the best one to share an office with. Until we got a new boss. Anna has, well, she was always open with that. She has autism and ADD. Yeah, so she told our new boss, who only heard autism and ADD. She's like, nah, Anna needs to get like less like hard work, like less qualitative work. So she put her with only administrative work. Anna, who used to be like this fun, happy person, well, she got more quiet. Yeah, she got more sick days. She didn't come to work. And when the boss needed to downsize, guess who lost her job? Yeah, my colleague Anna. Good to know now is that she's actually the head of a big organization right now. Well, what happened here was ableism. And what is ableism then? Well, if we look at a definition, it's the discrimination and social prejudice against people with disabilities based on the beliefs that typical abilities are superior. Ableism is rooted in the assumption that disabled people require fixing and that a disability defines people. Yeah, and defines people with a disability. Yeah, so this is the base here of the pyramid. Above that one, we have microaggressions, and you will soon get some example of how that one is. It's sort of the language of ableism. Above that, it's victimization and bullying, and that's where the legislation comes in. And we have discrimination, and in the top, violence. And as you can see the arrow next to the pyramid, it all is connected to each other. Ableism is the cause of violence, it's the cause of discrimination. Microaggressions can lead to discrimination, and so on. Yeah, here's some fun examples of microaggressions. A young man happily says, "Oh, it doesn't show you have autism." And the young redhead woman answers, Well, thank you. It doesn't show that you're normal either. Yeah. Or the absolutely most common wording that all of my friends with disability hear. Oh, you're such an inspiration. Oh, you're so good doing that. Except that it comes in sort of when you do the everyday thing. In this picture you see two men, one sitting in a wheelchair and one sitting in a chair. They're talking about something they see on the screen. Maybe they're programming together or something. Imagine another colleague comes up to the blonde guy sitting in a wheelchair saying, "Oh, you're such an inspiration." He's like a bit quizzed, like, oh, what do you mean? We're just doing like a basic thing. What do you mean me being an inspiration? I'm not doing any special today. Nah. Or do you mean I'm an inspiration for just getting up in the morning and actually have a job? Yeah, that is the problem, that those "you're such an inspiration," well, they put the bar of what you expect of a person with a disability really low. I mean, And here, some other ones. "I can't find my files. I'm oh so OCD today." Or, "I can't seem to write. I'm so dyslexic." And for a person who is really, really like focusing on details, "Oh, you're so autistic." Oh, I hear those words like on the subway quite often. And it is the ableist language. Microaggression is the ableist language that trivialize and diminish disability to be something that can be cured, and it is nothing serious about it. Well, those microaggressions, this ableist language, you hear it every day. It's like the Groundhog Day movie. Have you seen it one? Waking up and it's Monday morning again. You hear it all the time. And you might think of those microaggressions as mosquitoes. Yeah? One comment. What does that have to do anything? Like, yeah, you can shake it off. Okay. She's a person with low expectations, yeah. But when you hear it day after day after day, you start to question your own abilities. When it goes to victimizations and bullying, yeah, you sort of, the risks of heart diseases increases, depression, suicide, unemployment. Yeah, it's like having 1,000 mosquitoes attacking you all the time. I'm going to show you some statements here. Do you think it is important to having eye contact? Let's say in interviews or in a meeting. Is it important? Nah? Yeah? Well, a lot of people would disagree, especially if you have ADHD, autism, visual impairment, or if you just come from another culture than the Swedish one. Yeah. And what do you miss when you think that someone should have eye contact with you? Instead of sitting cross to each other, you can actually sit next to each other and you will feel much more comfortable talking. It's like Greta Thunberg says, "I'm proud to be on the spectrum. And no, autumn is not a gift. For most, it's an endless fight against schools, workplace, and bullies. But under the right circumstances, given the right adjustments, it can be a superpower. Think about my colleague Anna. Yep. Next statement. Is it important with right grammar in emails? Well, a person with dyslexia would probably disagree, or just having a second language. And talking about dyslexia, do you know how an A looks from underneath? Yeah, a person with dyslexia probably describe the A. It has to do how the brain functions and qualities. You see it in that makes people with disability overrepresented among engineers and architects. I'm going to end this one with giving you the best examples to not trip in the ableism trap. Okay? My boss would have a big use of this one. It's the people first language. Some researchers, well, they put together a big group of people and they put it in, divided them into group A and group B. Group A, they would talk about mentally ill people. Yeah? And group B talked about people with mental illness. Yeah, they talked for a while and then they gathered in a big room. And there comes some people with their own mental illness problems. And they met in a sort of speed dating. After the speed dating session, they got back to the group A and B. The group who previously talked about mentally ill people, when they talked about the people they just met, they talked about illnesses, symptoms, problems. Group B, who talked about people with mental illness before, well, they could mention job, family, interests, sports, political view, hobbies, you name it. And they met the same person. So if you use the people language first, like saying Anna who's blind, Anna who has autism instead of autistic Anna and blind Anna. And with that, I would say thank you and please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Åsa Gustafsson, Futurista. And I hope there's some time for Q&A. Thank you.
As an employee at the not-so-accessible organization, you have decided to steer things right. But how do you accomplish that? In this video, you will learn how to transfer your organization from a state where nobody cares about accessibility to a state where working with accessibility will be as natural as eating and breathing. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ilias Bennani. I have been working with IT accessibility since 1993, mostly as a developer along with user testing and accessible PDF documents, just to name a few things. I have done almost everything you can think of when it comes to IT and accessibility. Throughout the years, I have witnessed several examples of how people, despite their best intentions and with the greatest prerequisites, have made their customers or colleagues become opposed to working with accessibility. Sad to admit, but I have also made a few of those mistakes that I'd like to share, as well as some really successful ideas that turned out to work really well. So, let's talk about how to shift the culture of a whole workplace to a state where colleagues begin to compete to design and build the most accessible services. Or, to put it in a one-liner you'll be more likely to remember, from nobody cares to natively curious. What is accessibility? We all know that accessibility is the same as inclusion. Everybody has the right to use websites, apps, and read documents, etc. What's good for some does benefit all of us at the end of the day, and so on. All those things are of course true if you only take the user's perspective. But there is more to discuss here since there's a few other stakeholders you need to take into account. Let's change the subject for a while and talk about resources. Everything in our life is about resources. It doesn't matter if it's financial resources, as in money and assets, natural resources, as in air, water, and food, or personal resources, as in physical and mental abilities. No matter what you do or where you are, you will always be in either one of these three situations. 1. Gaining resources. 2. Spending resources wisely. 3. Losing resources. The first two situations are good for all of us, but the last one is what most of us will do everything to avoid. This applies both to yourself as a human being, as well as to the organization whose way of working you want to change. When you first approach an organization with the idea of accessibility, the reply will most likely be a pure and non-negotiable no. The reason behind this strange behavior is that your claims are interpreted by the organization as if they will most likely never benefit from this new thing called accessibility. The organization feels like you will put them in the state of losing resources, so in order to survive, the organization will have to deny your request. Instead of losing resources, there must be a way for the organization to gain resources, or at least spending their resources wisely and still be accessible. Therefore, in order to succeed, you'll have to come up with an idea of how the organization might benefit from this accessibility thing. The question you'll have to answer is, what's in it for them? You'll have to change the point of view from the user's perspective to the provider's perspective, but more on that later. Things you cannot do. Before we discuss what you actually can do in order to succeed, let's spend a few minutes talking about things you really should avoid. Trust me, I have seen this several times and, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I have made these mistakes myself. Make yourself Mr. Accessibility. Or Mrs. That's not so good either. It might be very tempting to consider yourself as the expert, the one with the most experience and knowledge. People around you should just listen and do what you tell them to. After all, you're the expert, right? Your coworkers will most likely have several points of view you as the accessibility expert did not think of in the first place. By listening to and discussing with your coworkers and learning from their experiences, you will be more likely to find the answer to the question of how the organization will benefit from applying accessibility. So, avoid being that arrogant expert and try to be more humble and compassionate. Threaten with the law. In the EU, we have had accessibility laws since 2018. EN 301/549 that has been ratified by the laws of all member states. Okay, that's a bit simplified, but you get the idea. If your organization defies the law, They will be subject to sanctions such as penalty fees. Since nobody wants to lose resources, the organization will probably do anything in order to avoid those penalty fees, right? Well, think again. If the organization gets caught breaking that accessibility law, the supervisory authority will give the organization enough time to address these issues long before any penalty fees are ruled out in court. Now, let's look at things you can do. Aside of things you really should avoid, there are of course several things you can do in order to make accessibility a natural part of the culture and workflow of your organization. What's in it for the recipient? This is the question you'll have to answer before you do anything else. You'll have to find out the benefits for the recipient, which in this case is the organization you urge to convince. So, what are those benefits? You're probably already aware of many of them, but let me point out some of the most common ones. Increased sales. By applying accessibility to your website, app, or any other way wherever your customers might do their purchases, the customers, their relatives, friends, and other people they know will choose you in favor of your not so accessible competitors. One might say that the necessary changes are too expensive and therefore do not meet the benefits. If that's the case, the organization has done a quite crappy product in the first place. If your organization is aware of that, chances are that your competitors are also aware of your situation and they might try to take advantage of your shortcomings. High quality code and therefore better SEO ranking. This one is a bit unexpected to most of us, but when your services are more accessible, that also means that the code behind those services is better written and therefore also easier and less expensive to maintain. More accessible code also means increased chances of a higher ranking on Google searches. So, by pointing out as many benefits for your organization, EA increase their resources, you will more likely be able to succeed in convincing them why accessibility is a good thing. Find other stakeholders. Now, when you have pointed out the benefits for your organization, it is time to team up with other persons who also share those goals. They might not be much into accessibility, but since you all share the same goals, you might also be interested in the same methods of reaching those goals. Potential stakeholders might be the CIO of your company, all the sales personnel, and hopefully also the development teams. Hire talented persons who themselves do benefit from accessible products and services. This is a simple trick to apply when you want to change the mindset of the entire organization. By employing someone very talented who's also in need of assistive technology, you will soon realize that accessibility becomes a natural thing for all your coworkers. This will also affect the development of your products and services since no one would like to harm a valued coworker, especially if that coworker happens to be your new boss. Hire people more experienced than yourself. This might seem to contradict what I just said. If you hire somebody who is more experienced than you, wouldn't that person pass you as an expert? You don't want to end up in the accessibility graveyard where no one is asking for your services. Well, my experience is quite the opposite actually. When you are working with someone more talented than yourself, his or her knowledge tends to spill over to you. Together, you will establish a workflow and an acceptance for accessibility far greater than you could ever do by yourself. Join the T12t community. If nothing of the above is working, you can always seek assistance from the T12t community. Here you will find the most talented accessibility experts in Sweden, ready to assist you in whatever issue you might need help with. Join the public Slack at t12t.se. Well, those are my best suggestions of how you should act in order to renew the mindset of your organization from nobody cares to natively curious. And one more thing before we end this video. Thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, Hampus here. I'm one of the organizers of this Stockholm Accessibility Meetup, and also kind of an accessibility nerd, as you might be able to tell by my WCAG beanie here. You'll probably be wondering, why are you outside and where the hell is your PowerPoint? And yeah, I'm outside because I'm a parent of a tiny baby who I'm out walking. I got creative to find some time, and I'm happy to tell you there will be no PowerPoint because of that. I'll be taking you along for some strolls and mixing it up with videos from other parts of my everyday life, I guess. All on the topic of best practices for making accessibility stick in your organization. But let's start with a common pitfall. Remember back in elementary school where all the cool kids would take wet paper towels and throw them at the wall? The way many organizations work with accessibility is kind of similar. They'll ask some accessibility expert like myself to do a one-time effort to find as many accessibility issues as I can, and then write them down. And it feels a bit like I'm writing the issues down on paper towels: fix contrasts, label menu button, remove the dumb accessibility overlay, and so on, and then soaking them in water and throwing them on the wall. It's a bit fun to do this, but the issues you throw on the wall eventually and quite quickly fall down into a wet puddle on the floor. Someone steps in once in a while, reminding them of the accessibility work you had planned but never got around to doing. So how do you make accessibility stick like super glue? Well, let's look at some of the things the most successful organizations have in common. I'll call them sticky accessibility wins. And here's number one. Make someone accessibility lead, or head of accessibility, or senior accessibility strategist, architect person, whatever you name it. Make it part of their role, their job description, and make sure it sticks even if that person quits or gets run over by a bus or whatever. But having one person in charge usually isn't enough. Imagine this fireplace full of big wooden blocks is where you work, and you want to light an eternal, cozy, inclusive fire in it. The accessibility lead is kind of like this single match. It would be very difficult for them to get all of these big wooden blocks to burn forever, all by themselves. You need to go out and find some firelighters to help you start this fire. So sticky accessibility win number 2 is find and organize your accessibility allies. People who can be passionate about accessibility and help the accessibility lead out in keeping the fire alive in your workplace. Some organizations call this the Accessibility Champions Program, others call it the Accessibility Guilds or Accessibility Circles or Forum. Whatever you call it, find these people and group them together. Sticky accessibility win number 3. Make accessibility a habit. Accessibility shouldn't be a one-time thing you do, it should be something you keep doing on a regular basis, but that's easier said than done, like with any habit. So one technique you can use, which is really effective, is called habit stacking. And this is how that works. Let's say you have the goal of meditating each day, but if you're anything like me, then you'll probably be able to keep that up for a few days at a time, but you find yourself forgetting about it, and finally, after a while, it might not happen at all. So then you can use habit stacking, which is basically you write down your other daily routines that you do each day, your daily habits, like brushing your teeth, maybe you have lunch, maybe you end work, and then you connect your new habit to one of your existing ones. So maybe you decide to meditate for 1 minute after you brush your teeth each day, or before you start working. And in that way, it's much more likely that the new habit will stick. So think of and maybe even write down which habits you already have in place at your work. It might be that every other week you have a sprint demo, or you have some knowledge sharing activities like lunch and learns, or at the start of each project you have to make a project plan. And then consider how you can add accessibility to these existing routines. So maybe you decide that every sprint demo you demo an accessibility feature, or that every project plan needs to have a part on accessibility, or every third or fourth lunch and learn will be on the topic of inclusion or accessibility. And in that way you'll have like stacked accessibility into your current habits, and it's much more likely to stick. Time for sticky accessibility win number 4. Avoid a compliance mindset. So the teams that do the best with accessibility tend to focus the least on GAAD, legislation and other standards and guidelines. Hoping that your colleagues who are new to accessibility will learn about it from the GAAD guidelines is kind of like me hoping my baby will learn how to walk by reading my university physics book. I mean, it's a great book, all the theory is in there, but it's a bit too long and abstract to digest at the moment. Instead, my kid will probably learn to walk by watching other people in the real world, by trying it himself a lot and failing, and maybe getting some support from a parent or two. In the same way, you should probably teach your colleagues about accessibility by setting up some user tests, arranging accessibility training, and letting people approach accessibility at their own speed. Time for the final sticky accessibility win, number 5, bake accessibility in from the start. I listened to a great talk by legal legend Lainey Feingold, who made a great comparison. She said adding accessibility at the end of a project is kind of like baking blueberry muffins, but adding the blueberries after the muffins are baked. It's the same ingredients, but not as good and just not right. One great way of baking accessibility in from the start is by adding it as part of your onboarding training for new colleagues. Another great way is to include diverse users as part of your user testing, and to user test on a regular basis and early on in the project lifecycle. So, time for a final recap. The 5 sticky accessibility wins are: number 1, make someone accessibility lead. Number 2, find and organize accessibility allies. Number 3, make accessibility a habit. Number 4, avoid a compliance mindset. And number 5, bake accessibility in from the beginning. Thank you for having taken these strolls with me, and good luck on your accessibility journey. Bye bye.
From ally awareness to knowledge and ability. Happy GAAD, everyone! I am Åsa Holmberg and I work as a digital accessibility strategist, and I'm also an advocate for inclusive design. I call myself a government geek since I have worked at many governmental organizations, and I have a passion for creating a better future with well-functioning digital services for everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the public sector organization's transformation journey towards meeting the requirements of the Web Accessibility Directive. So, where did we start? We formed a cross-functional team who began to fix a lot of old accessibility bugs, and we developed processes and checklists, and we also decided on how we should interpret and implement the WCAG guidelines. And some people might think that it's enough to just fix accessibility bugs and have processes and checklists in place, but it doesn't stop there. The bigger job is to build the ability in the organization to continuously create accessible services, documents, and websites. And for that ability to be built, the organization must be aware of the need. Awareness. Many in the public sector are focused on legalities and sometimes forget the human reasons behind the rules and regulations, but the law is really about people. The purpose of the law is not to make life difficult for civil servants who develop digital services. The purpose of the law is to enable everyone to participate in society. So, we raise awareness about the importance of accessibility. And we also try to engage people by reminding them on how important it is. People usually find it interesting to hear that 1 out of 5 users are affected by the lack of accessibility. And then we also remind them that the number is even higher if we consider all the temporary and situational disabilities that people can have. We also put up inspirational posters from gov.uk, the posters that contain do's and don'ts when designing for different users. And of course we trained and educated people in different professions and roles. All this contributes to people becoming more aware of the need of accessibility. But this is just the beginning. What will happen now in the transformation journey? The change curve. I noticed that the transformation pretty much follows a traditional change curve. The change curve shows how emotions in humans vary over time when people are in the process of change. Feelings go up and down during a transformation, and that's completely normal. As an example, we can take those in the organization who are about to take responsible for making documents accessible. People's emotions generally go up when we raise awareness about the need for accessibility. They think it's interesting to learn something new. But time passes and the deadline is approaching. The Web Accessibility Directive must soon be implemented. People know that we will no longer accept inaccessible documents on the website, and this is making people feeling a bit stressed. At this point, the positive emotions go down. People might try to deny the need for change and try to negotiate themselves out of it. They say things like, couldn't this pass as disproportionate burden? Or can someone else solve this for us? Why can't the communication department make our PDFs accessible? To that I say, you have to take responsibility for your own information. No communications department can do that for you. And every department and section that publishes documents and other type of information has a responsibility to make sure that the information is accessible. So people realize that they can't escape change. They have to accept it. The positive emotions are now at an all-time low. Now it's time to encourage people to start trying, even if they don't have all the answers yet. Some of them have had some training in how to make the documents accessible. So now it's time for everyone to start practicing it. And they are now willing to try, but are still looking for easy and simple solutions. Will a good word template solve the accessibility automatically? Can't you give us a really simple checklist with only 10 items on or so? To that, I say no. When people ask for simple checklists, I tell them that if I was going to France and didn't speak the language, would you give me a simple checklist with 10 items and expect me to immediately be able to speak French? Probably not. Accessibility can be quite hard actually, but only in the beginning. And the more you practice, the easier it will get. You need to take ownership. The emotions go up when people start exploring the tools and techniques. They start to take ownership over the situation. They actively try to adapt the accessibility requirements to their own reality. They ask themselves, how might we take care of this? Examples of people taking ownership were that some began to create their own reference guides for specific types of documents that they were handling. The manuals that we had provided during early trainings were extensive and covered everything. This made people feel overwhelmed. So they wanted information that suited their own particular needs on a need-to-know basis. For example, if you work at a legal department, you might not need to handle images or complicated tables in your documents. Another example was that people started a competence network for creating accessible documents so that they could help each other across the organizational silos. They had been feeling lonely where they sat in different parts of the organization and facing the same problems. So we inspired them to reach out to one another and learn from each other, since all this with accessible document was something new for everyone. The important thing here is to constantly encourage people to do things themselves. You can't really learn accessibility without actively doing it, and doing it, and doing it again. It's learning by doing. So, are we finally at the end of the transformation? No, we are not. Accessibility is an endurance sport. And without reinforcement, accessibility will never stick in the organization. It's like vacuum cleaning. You need to do it over and over again. There will be new people around. They will need to be trained and infused with accessibility thinking, and new techniques will emerge, and these need to be understood from an accessibility perspective. What we have developed must be codified into the organization's policies and official guidelines, so the transformation journey is far from finished. This can feel like an overwhelming task, and sometimes frustrating, since we can feel stuck. But when I look back on how far we have come during this last 5 years, I realize that the old saying is true. We tend to overestimate what we can do in a month, but underestimate what we can do in a year. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Martin Lexelius. I am a front-end developer for Know It Experience in Stockholm. Thanks for inviting me to this meetup. I'm going to talk about some things that we have been doing the last few months, and I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, I have named this presentation Accessibility as a Quiz, and you will understand why in a little bit. First, some background. What did we want to do? We wanted to create awareness about accessibility on the web. Educate, lay down some basic knowledge, and possibly, in the best case, change how people are working. And why did we want to do this? Well, it's the right thing to do, and it's important, but also it's crucial that we know these things inside the company because we have several projects in the public sector and we want to maintain a high level of quality. And how? Well, we knew what we didn't want to do. Not some boring lectures where we say this is so important and you must do this and you must do that. Also, not to do self-assessment, to just ask people how much they think they know. That didn't feel like the right way to do it, and that's not what we were going for. More like do something that people can remember. And how can we make it fun? So one idea came to mind. Let's make it a quiz. So not gamification, but quizification. I don't know if that's a word, but anyway, a quiz with 25 questions. And if we do it right, it can be fun. A quiz that is easy if you know it, but slightly tricky if you don't, and not too tech-oriented. So, who should take the quiz then? Well, us as a company is an agency with many skills. So, why not all skills? Because all skills should have a decent level of knowledge. It concerns user experience, it concerns design and tech, QA, testing, and copywriting, and also project managers. Let's involve everybody, even management. Of course, this quiz was anonymous, so people are not afraid to participate. After this quiz, people were curious. They started to show interest to know their score. But we couldn't tell them their score because we didn't know, because it was anonymous. So we invited them to a follow-up, which were 2 webinars with 45 minutes each, and these were 1 week apart. These follow-up sessions was kind of the whole point. Just to do the quiz and not the follow-up doesn't make sense, really. First, we create the interest with the quiz, and now we have a space for discussion. So we went through the correct answers, but also the wrong answers sometimes. And I would like to show you some examples right now. Example 1. John has misspelled his email address. Which of below is the biggest problem? And we can see a form input field with a label saying email, and the user has typed john.doe space at ggmail.com, and the input field has a red border. And the options are: an email input should have a CAPTCHA, a red border is not enough, The red color is not strong enough. John should know how to spell his own email address. And I don't know. I really like this one because you can touch base on so many different topics. You can mention CAPTCHAs and why they are horrible. You can talk about preventing errors and form validation. We can talk about colors. Option number 4 that John should know is a little silly, but it's not silly because we can go into this thing about blaming and shaming the user. Example 2. Which of below is a software for testing website accessibility? The options: Microsoft Access, Funka, Axe, Aria, and I don't know. The first option is a small and innocent trap because Microsoft Access has nothing to do with accessibility. We can explain what Funka is and what it's not. And then you talk about testing tools. Which tools are available? How do they work? Should you do manual testing or tool-based testing or both? And what to test and how to test, etc. Example 3, the last example. We talked about syntolkning, a visual description. And this image is a screenshot of a scene in which 007, James Bond, is fighting with a bad guy on the roof of a running train. I chose this scene because it's very visual. It has train sounds and dramatic drumming sounds, a gunshot, some dialogue, but for the visually impaired, it's impossible to understand what is happening. So I showed this clip without video, only audio. And then I showed it again, still not video, but I added the visual description. And this was an eye-opener for some people, and they will remember this segment, I think. And also it was fun to use this for internal marketing. We invited people with, hey guys, come listen to the webinar about accessibility. We're going to watch a James Bond movie. How did it go? Participants said it was a humbling experience. The feedback I received was along the lines of, I thought I knew stuff, but apparently I didn't. And I have realized I have gaps in my knowledge. We can see a stir in the working process, meaning more accessibility checks taking place before everything is done, people asking for feedback on ongoing work, and a team reaching out more in general. We have discussed a lot about the process, when and how to include ally thinking in the projects. We have more activities planned, but I cannot go into detail because it's not finalized. If you want to do something like this in your workplace, we are sharing the quiz. It's a Google form and you can find it here. It's a short link and a QR link. The link will be sent out or made available from T12t afterwards. And when using the link, you will be asked to make a copy. Please do that. But feel free to use it. Make your own version if you want. And that's it for me. I need to runda av. Thanks for listening. T12t has a Slack and you should join it if you haven't already. And you can find me there too. So that's it. See you around. Thanks. Bye.
Hello, my name is Marika Johnson, and I'm a doctoral student in human-computer interaction. And just to tell you what I look like, I'm a middle-aged woman with my hair in a ponytail. I have a headset on me, and the presentation I'm showing has the logo of KDH, where I'm a doctoral student, and the picture says, "I have to tell you," because that is what I'm going to talk to you about. Do we really need to tell people if we have a disability? And maybe a lot of you have heard that Elon Musk told the world that he has Asperger, and I think that is amazing, that you can choose to tell if you want to. But in my experience, that is not always the choice when you come to a workplace. So I have a few suggestions on how we can all contribute to a workplace that is more accessible, so people don't have to tell if they have a disability or not. 1 billion. That is the number of people around the world who live with a disability. And that is like 15% of the world population. And the source for this number is United Nations fact sheet on persons with disabilities. 1 billion amazing people. Some of them, I hope, will be my co-worker. Necessary for some, but good for many. I want to talk a bit about video captions. And this is a quote from Gernsbacher, who made a study about video captions benefit everyone. And it says, video captions, also known as same language subtitles, benefit everyone who watches videos, children, adolescents, college students, and adults. More than 100 empirical studies document that captioning a video improves comprehension of, attention to, and memory of the video. So now to a suggestion on how to make a workplace a bit more accessible for everyone. And that is simply make it accessible for all users. And on the picture here, there are two icons. They look the same, but they have different colors. One is green and one is purple. And these two icons represent the two interfaces that we often have, at least in healthcare, where I come from. We have one interface for the doctor or the nurse or the healthcare provider, and we have another interface for the patient. And in my point of view, we really need to make both interfaces equally accessible. Because in healthcare, I believe that we really try to make accessible systems so the patient can come to a video meeting, for example, but it's equally important to make the interface for the healthcare provider accessible, because then a lot more people can work in healthcare. So make it accessible for all users in all interfaces, not only for the client or customer or patient, but also for the workers at your workplace. Another way of making a workplace accessible digitally is to actually spread the knowledge and to help each other, because there is still a lot of people who don't know how to provide digitally accessible documents, for example, but many of the systems we use have features in them, so you can check the accessibility. But if you don't know how to do it, and if you don't know that you're supposed to do it, then it's kind of hard to actually manage to do it. So at Region Västergötland, where I also work, a bunch of very competent people started a network. And with the management's support, this network actually provides knowledge and helps projects to, in different ways, provide more accessible documents and how to maybe have a discussion with system provider that their system isn't accessible, and start a discussion so the system could be updated and delivered more accessible. So to spread the knowledge about the importance and also the know-how, how you actually do a document more accessible, that is very important. On this last picture, I have a quote from Stephen Hawking, a highly respected scientist who passed away a few years ago. And it says, "I believe things cannot make themselves impossible." And I totally agree on that. So I think it's important that all of us understand that there are 1 billion people with disabilities and that we all can contribute to make things a bit more accessible for people if we provide, for example, digital documents in a more accessible way. And I'm very happy when I read clear guidance from management, like at the university, who states that it is not okay to just provide material for students digitally accessible in a few ways, because there might be students that didn't tell that they have a disability, and they don't have to tell. So all the material is supposed to be provided digitally accessible according to the guidelines. And that is a very good way for management, I think, to foster a culture of a more diverse workplace. Thank you for listening and have a very good day.